Hello, hello, hello. This is Adrienne Berg, and this is the Ageless Traveler. And we're speaking today with Dr. Michael Fossel, and he has an incredible book. 30 years ago, he took the intrepid step of writing Reversing Human Aging. I could just imagine how that sat in those days, but today is a different day. Reversal, that's his new book, very simple. Reversal, Science, Medicine, and a Future Beyond Aging. Now, you know that I have been writing in our newsletter and speaking on our podcast about the fact that travel, many of you have been told, don't travel, it'll make you sick or you'll get sick. It's not good for you. Well, in fact, it's just the opposite. We've been talking about how it strengthens you, how it's a respite, how it can help your stress, your sleep, and even your strength. But let's go beyond that today, because here we have one step further, maybe many steps further. Can your lifestyle, different interventions that are here today, medical treatments, and even medical travel, reverse aging? And we're going to hear from a dyed-in-the-wool geroscientist. You may never have heard from one before, but particularly in the context of travel, this is a very unique show. So thank you, Michael, for being with us today.
My pleasure, Adrienne. Nice to see you.
Well, let's just talk about that big word, which is reversal, the name of your book. You're going a little bit step further. We do talk about intervening through our exercise, and we all know that eating better is a good thing. And as you would say, whatever your doctor and your mom told you to do is fine.
And your doctor cost more than your mother did.
Your
right?
mother, and yet they're both right. But you're going beyond this. You are taking this intrepid step saying we can do better. That's good, but it's base camp, maybe low-hanging fruit. What is it true in your scientific studies that we can reverse aging now, or is this something for the future?
It's very close. We know it's doable. I gave this talk. Actually, this was my 8th book. Most of the others were textbooks. But 30 years ago, I gave this talk at the NIH about reversing aging. And as I said then, it's not a question of whether you believe it can or can't. The question is, where's the data? And the data is pretty good. We've shown that we can reverse aging in human cells. We can reverse aging in human tissues. To the extent we're actually technically capable of it, we can do this in animals. The question is, what happens if we do that with humans? Specifically, we'd like to go after Alzheimer's and show that we can't just slow it or stop it, but actually reverse it. I think we can do it.
Now, we have a system here where prevention is really not what we are willing to pay for as a healthcare system. We're very good at paying for cure. Prevention is difficult. So you talk about reversing aging. Is that under the category of prevention, or is it under the category of cure? So let's hear what you have to say.
I'd say both. I think what we can end up doing is, for example, preventing Alzheimer's disease and curing Alzheimer's disease. Again, within some limits. Some things, Humpty Dumpty, some things are so broken you can't get them together. But in general, yes. But prevention, yes. Cure, yes. That's what we're aiming at.
Now, there's a word that we use a lot in the world of travel health, and that's mitochondria. And the reason we do that is we try to explain to people why they should exercise and why if they do go on vacations that are walking vacations or bicycling vacations, active vacations, rather than being on the beach, it does make a difference. But also, it's great to be on the beach for other health reasons. But let's start with mitochondria. I have defined it many ways, but I'd like you to do it the right way. Explain to people what mitochondria is and what does it have to do with aging?
Think of them as the power cells, or the electrical sources inside your cells. They provide the energy. You could think of them as a nuclear plant in a way, because they're full of all sorts of things you don't want in the rest of the cell. In this case, reactive oxygen species, but they're your powerhouse and you can't live without them. Now, a lot of people would say that the reason you age is because your mitochondria go downhill. Yeah. The problem is that your mitochondria are actually 2 billion years old. When you think of it, every mitochondria in your body you got from your mother, who got it from her mother, who got it from her mother, and that we trace that line back as far as we can, about 2 billion years. And the question then is not why do mitochondria fail, but why didn't they fail for 2 billion years? And now in a matter of decades, they clearly show problems. So if you want to say mitochondrial damage causes aging, you have to explain why the mitochondria are damaged in the first place. And yet they weren't when you got them from your mother. So it's more complex than you might think it would be.
So mitochondria, which starts out as a a real survivor, is what you're saying,
Sure.
does get damaged. Does it get damaged by entropy? Does it get damaged by being sedentary? Does it get damaged by toxins in the environment? Or is it all the above plus more?
Yeah, kind of all the above plus more. Most people think of aging as just entropy. That is, it's wear and tear, it's rust, things fall apart, things happen. But it's not. It's entropy in the face of failed maintenance. I had a friend who kept the same car for 50 years in my high school reunion. And it wasn't that he kept it 50 years because it was a great car. He kept it 50 years because he maintained it. It's like a 500-year-old house. It doesn't stay that way because it sat there and people ignored it. It's because they took care of it. Same with your body. Your mitochondria have been maintained for 2 billion years perfectly well, pretty well. But the maintenance schedule slows down as we get older. So it's not just entropy. It's that we stop, as it were, painting the walls, cleaning the windows. We stop maintaining it as well. And the outcome is mitochondria fail. The same is true of immune function. Our immune systems get older, they get slower and sloppier, basically. They attack things they shouldn't, and they don't do it as quickly as they should. But if you want to say, as some people have, that all aging is a responsibility of immune problems, for example, inflammation, you have to explain why it happened in the first place. Because again, we find there are cases where it happens more slowly or faster or in different ways. So it's always more complicated. The question is, why does your immune system fail? Why do your mitochondria fail? The answer is we stop the maintenance program. We slow down the maintenance program. That's what we can reverse.
So, it's so interesting because I'm going to relate this to two things that I talk about all the time. One is travel, and the other is ageism. And there's an incredible study, I think it's NIH, which talks about a phrase I had never heard before until I read this study. And it was self-imposed helplessness. It was actually used there. And they looked to see how other people's reaction to you changes your internalized view of yourself.
Yes.
And what they saw was that in older adults, people constantly say to them, both verbally and in the way they behave toward them, that you cannot do it. Now, you're talking about maintenance. You're talking about self-care, exercising, eating right, exercising your brain, getting new neural pathways, being out there in the world in many ways. Well, there's a reason that it stops at aging. It's not because of the aging. Very frequently it is lots of people, many of them who love you, telling you you simply can't do it, or you shouldn't do it, or you should be afraid to do it.
An attitude.
Or you deserve not to do it. That's a great one for retirement. You deserve not to have to go take out the garbage yourself or do all these functional things. Pretty soon you don't do it. The minute you don't do it for a while, you can't do it. The time comes that it just stops simply because of this maintenance. And I see that all the time. And I see it particularly in travel, where people take different kinds of vacations because they can't think that they can do the adventure stuff. I believe it intervenes. But is it really that simple if we continued our active life, even after we retire and stop working? Would that make a difference to our actual longevity, in your opinion?
Sure. Yes, but that won't reverse aging. Again, if I eat right, if I exercise, if I lower my stress, if I travel, all of those things can slow your aging and your attitude enormously. They don't stop it or reverse it, which is where we're going with this. But you're right about that. I'm 75. This is my 8th book. I've got another one contracted textbook to write next year, and I'm heavily involved in our biotech firm. I retired from clinical medicine 20 years ago, but I didn't stop doing things. That would be insane.
Well, again, I have to remind everybody that places like Del Webb and these over 55 communities were built for people who had been through World War II, had given a lot to their country, and was a reward. Today, you really have to get out there. You don't need the reward 100% leisure. It's harmful to your health. But now let's get to the reversal part. This is what everybody really wants to know from you, Michael. And remember, the name of the book is Reversal: Science, Medicine, and a Future Beyond Aging. So we've played around with the little stuff: eating right, getting out there in the world, writing books, being cognitively active. But what about reversal? What does that take? What is that going to take?
Let me give you an analogy. It's the symphony analogy you've seen in the book, too. I can take a symphony orchestra and they can play AC/DC, Grateful Dead, Mozart, John Cage. They could play a million things. But the decision is not made by the individual musician. The issue for what they play, the conductor, and it's the score they choose. So, if I'm young, I'm playing as it were Mozart. And maybe as I'm older, I'm playing as it were an atonal John Cage piece. Nothing particularly against John Cage, but he's really not my favorite. But if I want to change that and go back to playing Mozart, I don't blame the first violinist, and I don't say, let's have the strings play a little louder. What I do is I go to the conductor and say, listen, here's the Mozart piece. I want you to go back and play the sonata. Please do. And they do. And we find that works very nicely. Do that in cells. That is, it's not a matter of dealing with a mitochondria or free radicals or dealing with, individual pieces, beta amyloid in the case of Alzheimer's. Right. It's a case of going right to the symphony orchestra, right to the maestro, saying, this is the score you should be playing. And when we do that, we reset the score. We find the whole orchestra plays very nicely. Again, it's not the fault that the first violinist had a late light last night and drank too much. That's not the problem.
So is the conductor the genes and the DNA? So we can talk about epigenetics. Who's the conductor when it comes to aging?
Well, think of the instruments as the genes, and each musician is sort of the epigenetics. That is, they're the ones who play the genes. Yeah. So you can have a symphony orchestra with bad genes. You can have two ApoE4 alleles and have a high risk for Alzheimer's because, as it were, you start with an inferior violin. But you also can have bad epigenetics as well, partly because of your lifestyle, for example. Do you smoke? Do you drink a lot? Are you stressed? You just stop that. But the issue is going back to the conductor. It is not the individual genes, the instruments, and it's not the epigenetics per se. They matter. It's what they play, but it's who decides what they play. And that turns out to be the telomere. When we find that we reset telomere lengths in cells, we reset the entire pattern, the orchestration. They begin to play what you like them to play. It works very nicely. That is not to say that telomeres cause aging. The question, though, is where's the most effective point clinically and financially to intervene? And the answer is not by going to the first violinist or the string section. It's to go to the conductor.
The conductor. Well, we're going to take a little bit of a break. When we come back, we're going to unpack a couple of things. One, telomeres. If I hang out with geroscientists, they like to say, may the telomeres be with you. They want your telomeres to be long. And we'll explain what a telomere is and why it might be the conductor of aging. That's one thing we'll talk about. But we'll also talk about some of these issues of travel, which I have been so fascinated by, which is not medical travel, but longevity travel. Where can you go to get some of these interventions? And I'll ask Michael, how fast will they be available? So don't you guys go anywhere. Did you know that 3,000 people receive the Ageless Traveler newsletter every single Tuesday, and it's free of charge? Well, you simply subscribe on our website, agelesstraveler.com, when you see the pop-up, or take a look at the resource section that's in the show notes accompanying this episode. You'll also see how directly you can subscribe to our newsletter. Now, what will you find in there? Well, every single week, you will get news you can use about travel, cultural experiences you can enjoy, suggestions for luxury travel for less, and yes, I answer your questions. And you can even send me those questions by text or voicemail, and you'll see just how to do it when you receive your Travel Tuesday newsletter. Plenty of discounts, plenty of inspiration, so that you never stop traveling. That's agelesstraveler.com. Take a look at the pop-up, subscribe, or take a look at our resource list accompanying this and every episode so that you get a direct link to Travel Tuesday. And now we're back. And we're back with Dr. Michael Fossel. And as he told us, he's written 8 books, but many of them are for the trade. What's his trade? Geroscience. And that may be something that you've never even heard of, but it is not just the science of being old. It's the science of the processes of aging, because that's really where the meat potatoes is for whether or not we can eventually reverse aging. And Michael has written Reversal, Science, Medicine, and a Future Beyond Aging. I have read it, and it is not a textbook. It's a book you really can read and get things from for yourself in every one of the 220 pages. And if you were listening earlier in the show, you'll know that Michael suggested that our aging is like an orchestra. We don't look at one particular player, we don't look at one particular instrument. We look at the conductor. And in his case, he says, the conductor is something called a telomere. And we'll see if we can unpack that and define it in a way that we could all understand it, Michael. What is a telomere and why is it the conductor of aging?
As my friend Len Havlick used to say, it's the clock for the cells. It is the end part of your chromosomes. It's the last several thousand base pairs, in fact, tens of thousand base pairs, depending on which cell and your age. But what happens is that as cells divide, the telomere shortens slightly. And what that does, interesting enough, is change the pattern of gene expression. In this case, make your cells act old. So the question that came up back in the year 1998 was what happens if we reset it? And when we tried that in human cells in California in 1998, the answer was the cells acted young again. But we're not just cells, so we redid that in tissues, and then we've redone that in animals. The question is, can we redo that in you and I? And the answer is probably.
You know, the analogy sometimes is that a telomere is like the end of a shoe string where you have a little bit of plastic at the end, and it takes that plastic so that the string does not unravel. And we know that people die of old age. We've seen things. They died of old age. What does it mean? That their cells no longer were able to carry life. So if you can protect the cells by protecting the telomeres, my understanding, my layman's understanding, is that you may be able to reverse aging. And if you can reverse damages to the telomeres, even more so. Now, some of interventions like gene therapy, we can't get in the US. They always criticize longevity is always for billionaires, but not necessarily, because things trickle down. Are any of the interventions available today when you say we're almost there with reversal? What are the interventions that's almost there?
Yeah, let me give you a couple of places to go with that. One is to point out that when we get done with what we plan to do, it will actually lower the cost of healthcare. Certainly won't be for billionaires. I think we can prevent a lot of costs and lower the ones we have. The other, though, is that almost all of the interventions you're thinking of these days, for example, stem cells, beg an interesting question. Let's say that I've got osteoarthritis and I'm using stem cells for my knees. The question I would ask is, why put in stem cells when you could just reverse the aging in the cells you have? Well, that's where we're going with this. Now, in the meantime, you can try stem cells, but we're going beyond that. We're saying you already have old cells in there. Let's reset the clocks in the telomeres in this case. And by the way, it's not that the telomeres prevent the unraveling of the genes. It's a nice thought, the aglet on the shoelace, but it's actually more like a clock. It just changes the rest of shoelace throughout the rest of your shoes. But yes, right now you could get stem cells, but we're going to try to go to something much more fundamental than that and just reset your cells altogether.
And that would be done in a practical way, right where you are. This is not medical tourism that you're talking about.
No, it's not. Right. In fact, we'd like to make this available globally in the US and everywhere else, including Chad, Somalia, as far as we can make it available throughout the world.
Because you do have in your book, The Future of Medicine, the new medicine. Is that where you see the new medicine going? Yeah,
the analogy I used is, 200 years ago, most of us died of infectious disease. That was what killed us mostly. And that's changed dramatically. It's estimated this year in Iceland, for example, less than 1% of people will die of infectious disease. We've made enormous inroads. I think the same is going to be true of age-related diseases. Most of us all now the majority of us die of age-related diseases. For example, in the UK, this last year, it was Alzheimer's. In the US, it's generally heart disease. It moves back and forth, but those are age-related diseases. So I think that within the next 20 years, not past 200 years, next 20 years, we'll make dramatic inroads in treating age-related diseases, preventing and curing them.
And hopefully they'll be funded. Now, I think the people listening, because we have an older audience, have a real question on their mind, which is this. Is there an age limit to this? In other words, let's say we have the new medicine. You're 75. I'll be 78. When does this start? When should these interventions begin to take place? Is it too late? Because we now know that exercise, just to help us strengthen, can be done all through our life. 92-year-olds can actually improve their muscle strength by exercising. There was a time that, you checked out at 60 or 62 when it comes to this sort of thing. What about this new medicine that you're talking about, age reversal? Can we do some age reversal at older age?
Yes. Now, again, back to the Humpty Dumpty analogy. some things that are broken, you may not be able to get back. Here's a crazy example. Let's say that you've got osteoarthritis and that I reset all of the chondrocytes, the cells in your knees, so your osteoarthritis goes away. Excellent. But what if you don't have any more chondrocytes? What if you've totally lost the cells that line your knees, or you've had it replaced with an artificial knee? Well, I can't fix the artificial knee. It's there. And if you have the cells that I need, we can reset them. But if they're not there anymore, so there are limits. I guess what I have to say is, if we're dealing with a 50-year-old, that's easy. If you're dealing with a 100-year-old, that's harder. And in between there, it depends on who you are. As you know, we all age at different rates. I know that every time I go to see my doctor, they want to know if I can stand on one leg. I said, try you, see what you can do. We age at different rates, and we don't know what those limits are yet. And there are also technical limits. To what extent are we capable of doing this? We have to reset the telomeres and all the cells that we need to. And, in animals, we can reset certain percentages of them, and we're getting better at this, but we don't know what our limits are yet.
So, one of the things we talked about geroscience, but most people know gerontologists.
Mm-hmm.
I had a very, very good friend who was the head of the Department of Aging in New York City, Janet Sainer. And she said, all babies are the same, but all seniors are different. And that is part of our ageism. We, after age 65 and up, everybody's in the same lump. But as you're saying, everybody ages differently. And
right.
Even more so, different parts of our own body age differently. So we're getting an awareness, I think, of that. But let's talk for a moment about ageism, and then I want to talk about some of the science. And that, I don't want to leave the issue of coverage, financial coverage, because for your research to be really successful, it does have to be democratic in the sense that everybody can have it. Today, everybody can have a statin. Today, everybody can choose if they want to exercise or not. I am concerned that when you get to the interventions that are more exotic, and I'm going to call what you're saying right now exotic. Well, we have limited budget. We're going to stop bothering with folks who are over the age of 60 or 70. Do you see that coming down the pike?
Let me give you some pieces of good news. We have 2 independent global groups who have committed to funding us. And both of them said the same 3 things. One is, don't tell anybody who we are. Okay. They'd like to be private. Don't tell anybody how much we're going to give you. Okay, we can do that. And the third is, we want to make sure that when we come out the other end, that people can afford this. As one of them said, make it as cheap as aspirin. I can't make it as cheap as aspirin, but we can make it pretty cheap. That's the beginning of this comment. Now, let's look at some of the costs involved. 3 years ago, we put out a contract to see how much it would cost to make this. And at that point, even if we were making it for 140 people, it worked out to $30,000 a person. That's less than a third of what it costs to treat somebody and watch them die in the last year of Alzheimer's in this country. So what I've already said is that as of 3 years ago, again, independent of administration costs and transportation, we could cut the cost of healthcare. And that's without economies of scale and without improved technical abilities. No, I think we can make this so that it's remarkably cheap. And in the long run, as I say, our investors, our funders would like to see us be able to make this available to people who can't even afford $1,000.
It's so important. There have been ethicists who've looked at this, and they have done studies that are honestly very shocking, showing that available interventions for people with physical problems already, doctors don't prescribe if they're over a certain age. I mean, that amount of medical ageism really is there. But to your point, the NIA, the National Institute on Aging, that does a lot of research, is often called the NIA, the National Institute of Alzheimer's. Why? Because they spend billions only on that one disease. If that disease could be prevented or cut down, we would save so much money. It is the most expensive problem that we have in healthcare. And if what you're saying can reverse that, my goodness, it's worth every penny. Now, I want to get back to some of the studies that have to do with travel that I have been personally very impressed with, because they do look at certain things like feelings of self-confidence and self-competency when you travel, particularly in older age, that then propel you to do more and more of that maintenance you're talking about when you get home, because you feel that you're in control. the exercise, the better eating, the lack of isolation, people really getting relationships and life purposes and all that good lifestyle stuff. But when they look at it from a science or geroscience point of view, they're always talking about improving the issue of methylation. And I think that's a word that most folks don't know much about. I'd like you to talk about that when it comes to this issue of aging and how it fits in to the process of aging.
Methylation is a way of tagging your genes. I'm going to simplify a lot, but so that they know whether they should be expressed or not expressed, or at what rate they should express whatever they're going to make. So methylation is a sort of a control mechanism for gene expression in a sense. And so is acetylation, and so Yamanaka factors, and a lot of other things we could talk about. But again, these are part of the control program that's set back by the telomere. So methylation is an important issue, but it's not the best target to go after. It's, again, it's like me saying, I want the strings to play louder. That's not the issue. It's the exact pattern of what they play that's important, not how loudly they play it.
So going back again to the telomere, there are nutraceuticals that they all have the word tele at the beginning of them. I'm not going to give you a brand, but there are plenty of them. They're in competition with each other, and they're expensive in the sense that you take a pill every single day. It might cost you $150 a month.
Correct.
And they're ostensibly to maintain you. They don't say reverse aging. They say better your aging, to protect the telomere, which you call the conductor. So it's an important thing. What do you think? What is your take? Because you do talk about nutraceuticals, and you have a big list. And what's your take on it? Because you can go spend the price of a mortgage if you take every single nutraceutical that's out there.
Yeah, certainly all of us should eat a better diet, or an optimal diet. Let me put it that way. We'd all disagree on what that best diet might be. But, you want to eat sensibly, whatever that really means. When it comes to nutraceuticals, I'm just going to generically say most of them are probably a waste of money. It's very easy to think of things that might help. The question is, do they help? Now, in the case of telomerase activators, which is what I think you were talking about, in this case, they're compounds like estragenol. I was the editor of a medical journal where we published a number of peer-reviewed articles on this. And it was fascinating because it showed, for example, that people who've been on some estragenol compounds for 6 months had immune systems that acted as though they were about a decade younger. Now, that doesn't mean that you took a 70-year-old and they really looked like they were 50. It didn't happen that way. But there were a number of indications that seemed to work fairly well. So a couple of questions. One is that true? Does it work? I don't know. That's what the initial data seemed to suggest on the 4 peer-review articles that we ended up publishing. Second question is, when you order this, are you getting what people say it is? Hard to tell. Maybe there are 4 dozen companies out there offering this. Which ones are making this up and just putting salt in the thing? Which ones are actually giving you estragenol? I don't know. Next question is it worth it to you? If I have $1 billion and I'm 80 and I'm aging, estragenol compounds, well worth it. What's the problem? On the other hand, if I'm on a fixed income and I'm 60 and I'm healthy, why would I do that? Maybe it is worth it, but a couple of $100 a month on a fixed income if I'm healthy, I'm not sure. So I think there are a lot of open questions. Is it worth it to you? How can you afford it? Are you getting what you're paying for? Does it work in the first place? I suspect for many of us, the answer is yes, it's probably worth it. But you see, I say probably. It depends on you, and it depends on things that none of us are really certain about.
It's interesting, though, because that hits the issue of the telomere. And it is out there, and I think people should know it is out there. So I'm going to ask you the perfect question that we always are concerned about at the Ageless Traveler. And that is contraindication of these things to your usual medication. For example, we have a lot of statistics that show that almost every one of our listeners takes a statin. It's one of the few things where you don't have to have a diagnosis that you can get covered because of its power. Most of us have high or low blood pressure. So we're taking some kind of a pill to regulate that. And last but not least is a lot of us are diabetic. Those are the 3 things that older active adults generally have pills for on a regular basis, a big percentage. And then they say, but don't eat a grapefruit. So everybody knows that there's some things, even some foods, that you shouldn't eat if you take certain medicine. What I'm asking you is I'm bringing you to that point that you want to get to, where we're beyond the current medicine. We're starting to get into age reversal. Will any of this be contraindicated to the kinds of things we're already taking that seems to be working, at least to maintain our health?
No, no, it's a totally different mechanism. It approaches it a totally different way. Um, I am reminded of I got one of the first polio vaccines that came out in 1954 or something when I was a kid. But if you go back to about 1952, there was a bestseller. It was called something like Diet Conquers Polio or Diet Prevents Polio. Well, diet doesn't prevent polio. It doesn't conquer polio. On the other hand, having a healthy diet probably lowers your chance a little bit of getting paralytic varieties of polio, a little bit. Certainly a good thought. But, the Salk vaccine, when it came out, followed by the Sabin vaccine, totally different mechanisms. Diet be damned. I'm in favor of a good diet, but, we're dealing with was dealing with a different mechanism. Nothing against good diet, please do. But no, we're dealing with something much more fundamental.
So I'm going to take something that you wrote in your own book, right? Because I wrote it down for myself to remind me for my own self. And it was Michael Pollan's words. And that was, eat food, not too much, mostly plants.
Yes. And he said something about, and never eat anything your grandmother couldn't pronounce, something like that.
Yes.
Right.
We wouldn't recognize as food. Though.
Yes, exactly right. And he also said, eat from around the outside of the grocery store. That is the meat, the vegetables, the dairy, not the inside with all the processed foods.
Right.
Right. Right.
And now, so I think people are looking for a magic bullet. Let's face that. Nutraceuticals in many ways is kind of a magic bullet. So when we are beyond medicine and we're in the Michael Fossel world of medicine and age reversal, do you think people will look at this as a magic bullet? Is it one where we can now go out and have cheesecake, or do we have to keep up all of this other maintenance too, if our goal is age reversal? Now, we may keep that up if our goal is having a good figure. That's a different story. But if that's the goal, can we simply rely on the new medicine?
Only relatively speaking. When I was 20, I always ate 2 desserts all the time. Now I'm a little older, thank you. And if I have 1 dessert, it's probably going to stick around. I eat differently. Now, what if I could make my metabolism, my mitochondria, for example, act like a 20-year-old again? Maybe I could eat 2 desserts. That doesn't mean they're good for me. It means that the bad effects aren't as obvious as they are at my age. So yeah, I think we can probably behave a bit more irrationally, but there are limits. If you smoke, well, I still remember Jean Calment, quitting smoking after age 100 because she thought it might be bad for her. There's some things that you shouldn't do even at age 20. Maybe I shouldn't have had 2 desserts at age 20 every day. But yeah, within reason, you can probably be more relaxed in what you do.
Well, I think that's a good thing to look forward to. And we'll take our last break here. We come back. I want to talk about a couple of other things that are on the fringe of this. Age reversal and travel. One of the things that is probably the centerpiece of most of the geroscience studies when it comes to travel and vacation is stress reduction. So I want to go back to the not so active travel and talk about the effects of stress on aging when we return, and your opinion as to whether a good vacation, frequently taken, really does make a difference. Because a lot of people simply are spending fortunes to go to eco lodges so that people take their phones away, physically take their phones away. That's what they're spending money on, to unwire. Don't you guys go anywhere. We'll be right back. If you've been thinking about a cruise, I've definitely got you covered with Cruises It. Now, we have just become affiliated with them. And who are they? Well, Cruises It is the top agency for all the main cruise lines and some of the less known cruise lines as well. Cruises It has access to booking space that's been open years in advance, so you can get the best cabins. That's just number one. But they also make the prices lower. The cruise lines give Cruises It their own exclusive agency discounts. And if you're not from the cruise line, They have their own agency discounts that would apply as well. So you get both any discounts you would normally get on the cruise line, plus additional discounts that are given exclusively to Cruises It because they bring in so much business. On top of all those discount perks, when you book with them, you get the best rate guaranteed. And this is because Cruise Fair Watch system takes place. Now, what Cruises It does is it tracks the pricing until the final payment date. So you keep in mind that to get the best rate guaranteed, you have to use my site. We have affiliated with them specifically. I sat down, I met with them in Tucson, Arizona. I met with Marianne Weather. We've now become good friends. She gave me a direct line, not only a link, which you can certainly use right away, but if you have questions, even a specific phone number. Cruises, it offers this not just to anyone that is one of our followers, but if you have friends and family, you can bring them in too. So just take a look at the show notes and you will see our dedicated phone line and our dedicated link. Happy sailing. This is Adrienne Berg, and we are back. We're back with the Ageless Traveler, and I would wager that you can't find another travel show that's talking about longevity, health, and geroscience specifically. But I'm doing that because I have a deep-rooted belief that travel and regular travel and a particular kind of travel, active travel that challenges you, actually does create a better outlook for your own personal health span, how healthy you are as we age, and your lifespan, how long you're going to live. So I will tell you something, Michael, why I'm so involved with this, that will make this very clear in terms of my next question about stress reduction. I never saw as a child a relative who lived past the age of 60. Now, very few people can say that, and I don't say it proudly. My father, for example, passed away at age 42. It was very clear now looking back that it was a stress-related stroke. My mother was the only one, and she lived into her 90s, and she was very, very careful about her lifestyle because she was very obese at one time and was heading down that same path. Well, the earliest thing she did was send me to travel. And I've been to 140 countries, and I've been traveling since age 11, and I've never, ever, ever stopped. And I've actually only became aware of the interventions that this was causing when I learned the word epigenetics and how you can basically, as I'm overstating it, beat some of the odds. I had the genetics of a fruit fly, you know. So I really believe in how genes express themselves differently depending on your lifestyle and your environment. What the studies show is they talk about inflammaging, they talk about stress reduction and how important it is, and then they measure how much you're eliminating stress through travel. And they're pretty decent measurements. Do you see that direct connection between stress and aging, and is some of your reversal having to do with stress mechanisms in the body?
Yes. Let me give you another analogy. I mentioned that one of the people I went to high school with had the same car for 50 years. And one of the things I said to him is, how does it last so long? He said, for one thing, I never parked near to the grocery store door because that's where everybody tries to hit you. I park out at the end of the lot. But he also pointed out that he's a careful driver. I think some of us are high risk drivers, and we're not surprised when our car ends up with problems. So yes, lowering stress, it's not the travel. It's not being out on the highway. It's kind of the way you drive in many ways. Where you go, some people are stressed by travel. Some people enjoy travel. It's not the travel per se. I think it's your attitude toward travel. It's the way you look at it. Am I enjoying this? Am I doing this because it's fun? Or is I'm doing this because I'm told I have to go to France? No, go because you enjoy a cup of coffee sitting by the Seine. Do it.
So this stress reduction really does affect the cells of the body and your immune system and your what they call inflammaging. And as I say, it's particularly important to enjoy it. So today, even with all of these transitions we're having, it's happening in travel too. I have to say that the buzzwords are transformative travel, what you just said, slow travel, wellness travel. Well, aging is an overall process. It's a process. It's dynamic.
Yes,
And
it is.
I would like to talk about cognitive reversal for a moment. I'm talking about the healthy person, but maybe their fluid intelligence, how fast they are, is declining a little bit. Their hand-eye coordination, maybe even in driving, is declining a little bit. Will this type of thing that you're talking about, the age reversal, have to do with that as well? The normal aspects of cognitive aging. Yeah.
Yes, and and that's what we find, for example, in mice when we do this. You find that they're capable of doing things they hadn't been able to do for the past 6 months or years. They got older. So you actually reset the aging process cognitively. So yes, I am. I'm talking about, you know, when you're 20 and you can't find your car keys, you say a four-letter word. But at our age, you can't find your car keys. You begin to panic and think, what if it's Alzheimer's? Well, I think we can reset all of that.
So interesting because a lot of that too is ageism. The first thing you think of is your age.
Mhm.
This is because of age. And the group that makes most ageist jokes are older people, and they make it almost to show that they're with it. They get it, that we're older and we're funny with regard to that. But it's internalized ageism. And it'd be interesting not just to reverse the aging, but to reverse the way we think about aging. I
Mhm.
wonder if that will come with it, because that's more of a social issue than it is a geroscience issue. But very well, if we can really reverse aging to that degree, we may stop also and reverse ageism. Be interesting to see that social
I think
phenomenon.
so. I think so too.
I think that might work. When are we going to have We just want to know. Are you allowed to say?
If all goes well and all never goes well, things always happen. We would be the phase one human trial would be 2 years from now.
Well, this has been a terrific conversation and a very unusual one for, as I said, for a travel show. And I'm proud to be able to bring these kinds of experts. I would say geniuses. Michael may or may not say that, but he doesn't
Mm,
have to about himself. A lot of people know the truth that you're really out there and doing something that's really going to happen.
I
So
hope so.
I hope
As
so.
you travel, I'll say,
So I thank you so much. You know what I'll say to everybody else? I say it every week. Please, please, everything we do here, it's for the purpose of democratizing travel and breaking down barriers, whether it's health, mobility, companionships, or money, to lifelong travel. So do subscribe to our free newsletter called Travel Tuesday. Do join our wonderful Facebook salon, meet like-minded people who are out there and active. Take a look at our ambassador program for volunteering all over the world. You'll find that on agelesstraveler.com. And never stop traveling.